I've heard a lot of Jared Goff comps
I've heard that
here.
too.
I'm not sure I love that comp. I definitely see where it comes from. I'm not sure I love it. I think the release is similar. But
I
other
I
than
see
that, I mean, he's kind of lanky, I guess.
I see Matthew
Um,
Stafford personally
okay. Yeah, I
watching
can see
his
that
tape.
too. I almost,
Um,
I don't want to say Joe Burrow, but I feel like it's similar.
that's a little rich for me personally, but I can see the some of the
But
comparisons there.
I'll start here. I think my biggest concern with him was consistency.
Hmm.
And I know he put up big games week in and week out. I'm not talking about his stats. His stats were good all season. I'm talking about if you watched Ohio State play, especially in the middle of the season where things just kind of slow down, you felt like CJ Stroud disappeared a little bit and you didn't hear as much about him. You didn't feel like he was making things happen. You saw their offense fizzle out a little bit, especially in the first half of games before they really got things going. And that's concerning for a guy who's going into the NFL to play, potentially a 20 game season. You know what I mean? But as far as the physical talent, has it all. It's just
Yeah,
him playing his best football consistently for me.
I definitely see the consistency situation. I think that kind of disappearing act you definitely see when he's playing tougher opponents. Going back and watching a lot of his tape, I tried to find as many games versus bulk opponents as possible. Because you can look up any highlight reel or whatever, and you'll see him torch, 2-11 team.
Right.
But I wanted to see every single snap against Michigan, every single snap against Iowa. Like what when it comes to the nitty gritty, the teams that when he's going against players that are NFL caliber or starting NFL caliber
Yeah.
to an extent, what are we looking at here? Um, and one of the things that I always saw about him was the offense that he's in is very quick release, get the ball out, first read.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when the first read isn't open,
Yeah.
it's like there's a processing like little separation. I don't know what it is because it's not that he can't make reads. I don't believe he can't make reads. I think he can. I think he's extremely smart. I've seen him. One of the things looking back at his tape throughout multiple games was how quickly he was able to identify things before the snap and change play calls immediately or pick up. He'd run up to his offensive lineman, start calling things out. He called out a linebacker for the running back to block on a screen on a pass that worked perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
He's very, very smart. When the read isn't there, or the first option isn't there, he stares that receiver down a lot before he
Yeah.
decides to change. And sometimes he doesn't, and he just dumps it into double coverage.
And I feel like
Especially
that
on
probably
like,
stems from all the talent they had at wide receiver
oh,
and
for
good
sure.
offensive lines where he can really get away with doing that. That receiver, if I hold this ball one more second, that receiver is going to get open. And this offensive
Right.
line is going to give me the time to do that. So I would guess that's probably where that comes from. It'll be interesting to see how he's able to make that transition to the NFL where he's not going to be afforded that extra second.
Right.
But I'll continue with that in a second. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say, and as you kind of mentioned, I think it helps a lot that he had Marvin Harrison Jr.
I
there
mean, I
because
would stare at him the whole game too
that's,
if I
yeah,
was the
exactly.
quarterback. He's
Exactly.
unbelievable.
You can put five people around him and it's still a 50-50 ball.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get it. But it was those situations where you're staring down Chris Stover, or I think it's Chris Stover, the tight end in double coverage. And I'm like, there's a running back in the flat wide open that you're missing. You've got a receiver down there that is in a better position. And I know that it's like we're a rollout, tight end your number one option, but
Mm-hmm.
you gotta get up on it. You gotta pick up. And it reminded me a lot of Matthew Stafford, especially after Megatron
Sure.
left. And you kind of see that where it's like he'd be staring down like Golden Tate
Yeah.
or
I could
recently Cooper
definitely
Cup,
I could definitely see that. And so if I can backtrack just a little bit, as the season started, I was very, very high on Bryce Young. Obviously, I still am. We just went over that. As a couple weeks went by, I start thinking about the size thing. CJ Stroud starts making some insane plays. The dude made some insane plays in college. I'm like, man, this might be the guy. And then I'm like, nah. Like I said, he faded away to me in the middle of the season. I felt like every time I turned him on, I was a bit underwhelmed. But I still kind of, kept him in the back of my mind. Then we get to the end of the season, and he plays again Georgia.
Yeah.
The Peach Bowl on New Year's Eve. That was one of the greatest games I've ever seen a college quarterback play. I mean, he was unbelievable in that game. The way same thing we talked about with Bryce Young, the way he kept plays alive. When the pocket was collapsing, he would make one guy miss, make two guys miss, roll out, hit Marvin Harrison downfield. And I think he did that a couple times for touchdowns. And what he was able to do, every clutch situation in that game, it felt like he ran for 15 yards and a first down. And that was
he's got some
crazy
athleticism
to watch because I had never seen him use his feet like that before. I honestly didn't know he could run the ball like that. Like that, I didn't know that was a part of his game. I hadn't seen him do it at all. And then here on the biggest stage, he brings it out. He's finding a way to will his team to the finish line in a situation where they should have probably been overmatched. They're missing one of their top receivers. They just got the brakes beat off them by Michigan. Georgia was the number one team, lost one game in 2 seasons. There wasn't a lot of people, nobody thought it'd be a TCU Georgia game, but not a lot of people thought the Buckeyes were gonna win that game. And if it wasn't for a terrible kick at the end, they should have won it. So
I agree. He had an incredible game.
He might have changed my mind. And like I said, here we are today, and I'm leaning towards Bryce Young again. But on that day, I said, okay, I believe in CJ Stroud for sure.
That game was incredible. And if you go look back, the third touchdown Ohio State had when they go up 21-7, that pass CJ Stroud makes, running out of the pocket to the side, about to fall out of bounds, just slings it right perfectly over the linebacker and then hits the receiver where only he could catch it. That was one of the best passes I saw all season, easily.
Very, very good passer.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Very good passer.
But also in that game, especially going into the second quarter, he got bailed out a lot by how handsy Georgia's corners are, especially Keely Ringo. Mm-hmm. There were a couple pass interference calls that came in third downs, fourth downs, just in time for him. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because he has a tendency to underthrow receivers on go routes. Whatever it is, if you ask him to hit it probably mid 30, 35, 40 yards. I mean, deep, but not those 50-yard bombs, which he can pull out. Mm-hmm. And you try to hit him on the sideline, he can't really get it in the breadbasket. He always ends up putting it on their back shoulder, so they have to turn around or kind of adjust on it. And again, this is nitpicking. This is very nitpicky.
Yeah.
But he definitely has some parts of his game that scare me a little bit because I think it's a little more than just he needs polishing. Mm-hmm. It's more some serious coaching concerns, I'd say, or just he'll need some coaching. I don't think he's someone you sit at all for first year. I don't think so either. I don't know if I see his ceiling. I think his ceiling is probably at best low top 10 to teens in the NFL for quarterback rankings. I'm thinking he'll be a 12 to 10 like Dak when he was playing well kind of situation.
Right.
Which again, you can build around that.
There's nothing wrong with having a good starter in the NFL.
Yeah, no, yeah. Sure. I feel like this is the only reason I preface it that way is because one of the guys that we'll talk about later, I honest to God think he has the potential to be an MVP caliber, a number one player in the NFL, like a god amongst men. I don't see that in CJ Stroud, personally.
Yeah. I think with CJ Stroud, you're looking at a pretty high floor, but not the highest ceiling as far as some of these guys go for sure. But and you look at, Bryce Young, we just talked about, the biggest concern is what he doesn't have physically. You don't have to worry about that, any of that with CJ Stroud. I mean, he's a guy who can stand back there in the pocket, see over everybody, take hits if he needs to. There's a lot to like about CJ Stroud.